Now we are recording. Hjalmar, warmest welcome to Genius Leadership Podcast. I want to directly hop into the topic as we discussed. I've done the introduction already and explained what you do at Grid, and now I want to discuss in detail how you actually do those great things that you're doing. So first question would be, what is leadership for you?
A lot of things can be leadership, and I think that in the end of the day, pretty much all of us that are working as a part of some sort of a team are leaders in one way or another. Obviously, some are both more formal leaders and some are more natural leaders than others. But it is something that everybody has to think about when they're working as a group. And oftentimes, actually, some of the best leaders, they don't even realize that they are leaders or aren't formal leaders. People are naturally drawn to them and kind of how they articulate and how they motivate people and so on. I think that leadership is a very wide and open space. When it comes to kind of more formal leadership, I mean, it is all about. I've gradually come to kind of understand that whatever you're trying to do in business or in life has mostly to do with the people that you get on board, and not only the people, but also how well they work together, how well they are motivated, and so on. Pretty much every problem you have or anything that you need to tackle, is a people thing. So most solutions are also people solutions. I've gravitated very much from, I've been in a product business for pretty much my whole life, but I've very much gravitated from kind of the product being the first and foremost thing, to the team being the first and foremost thing. And then actually, I mean, there are many styles of leadership, but I try to act and kind of try to be as much a part of the team as I can, and get people to buy into the vision that we have and that we're working towards, and actually try to form that vision together with people, and then get them to kind of work together and want to go where we're going, rather than kind of trying to come up with ways to explain, should we say, downwards, to in a hierarchical manner, like these are the things that need to be done, and this is what each and every one of you should be doing. So maybe the strange answer to what is leadership is good leadership is great teamwork.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And you said about that for you as a leader nowadays, it's important to be as much part of the team as possible. So how does that work? I mean, you are running a company that is now 20 people and keeps growing. You have a lot of responsibilities on your table. What does it mean on a daily basis to be part of the team?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's something that I'm learning every day, and I sometimes feel that I actually I feel, and I'm trying to be more kind of a part of the team than especially the new people in the organization feel like they will take a casual conversation about something more as direction than as a brainstorm, or as something where I'm actually kind of approaching the conversation on a peer level. But they see it kind of, they are, in their mind, they feel that there's a hierarchy in place. And that is actually something that I'm just learning to navigate, especially because we've grown quite a lot recently. How to properly kind of earn that trust and earn people's confidence in that, an idea from me is just an idea, and that needs to be kind of scrutinized and should be looked at as an idea coming from everyone else. And then we have a structure in place to actually filter out the ideas and prioritize the things that we're working on, which is not I decide the priority, but it's much more, first of all, it's much more organized than that, and secondly, it has input from a lot more people than just me. So that's that. Then also, I mean, a big part of it is just being approachable, making sure that you are I think actually empathy is a big part of it. Like, you are, to make sure that those kind of human connections are there as well, and you connect to people on a personal level. It just makes everything else so much easier.
Mm. So basically what you're talking about partly is there is no prestige, that you are the founder and the CEO, thus people should not come to you with this and that question, or you can't have this and that discussion.
Yeah, I think that honestly, if it came to that, if it came to that, we just were in a deadlock and we couldn't come to a conclusion, then it would be on me, and I think everybody would understand that it would be on me to kind of cut that knot. But that hasn't happened yet, I think, in the history of the company, because we've just managed to kind of come to conclusions and kind of steering things more through, through having a common vision, and then talking through what are the priorities and what are the tasks that help us get towards that vision fastest, more than okay, tell me what to do, and kind of you organize this.
It's very interesting. I'm now reflecting while you're talking about the culture in Sweden, at least, about the consensus and how important it is that everyone is on board and so on. And I've seen it many times that it actually goes overboard.
Yes.
People are really indecisive because one person out of 30 is not on board. That's why we need to take another round of meetings, discuss it yet again, and so on and so forth. So where do you draw the line between being a part of the team member and being the decision maker? Because you are responsible for everyone's salary and the product, and you have so much on your plate.
Absolutely. So it's actually, this is reflecting very well back on my previous experience. I used to work in the States, but for a company that was Swedish by origin, and there was quite a lot of Swedish leadership there as well. And all the Americans, they had learned to say consensus and sing it a little bit like you would do. And that meant a totally different thing than just the word consensus. That was kind of the Swedish consensus that you're talking about, where you take a very long time in making sure that everybody is in total agreement on everything. I think that it is hard to find that middle ground, but it has to be there. And I think that as long as there are no politics involved, as long as everybody is sincere in their motivations, people will accept the outcome. So we talk about it here, and I was actually super proud when I heard this from somebody that I've been working with for a long time, is that the atmosphere both here at Grid and where we were working together previously at Data Market was that it wasn't about being right. It wasn't about who was right. It was about what was right. So people were just willing to come to, like, let's approach this, no matter kind of who is putting what on the table. Let's discuss it and come to a conclusion on what is right, but not kind of go by any single person's direction and so on. So it's about kind of seeking the truth rather than kind of what is right. And I think that if again, even if you come to a conclusion that someone on the team is not fully aligned with, as long as they trust that the group came to that conclusion with the best intentions, then I think that that's much easier to accept. I really like the concept. I think probably Amazon has formalized this more than most companies, but you probably heard about kind of Jeff Bezos's approach, where it is like if there is a disagreement in the group, there is still a requirement that you commit to it. So it's called. So I think the phrase is disagree but commit. Mm-hmm. So you disagree, but you understand that the outcome was not kind of your way or some other way, and then you have to commit to actually try to make that way that was decided on as successful as possible, even though it wasn't your idea, because otherwise you start creating these weird incentives where you're looking forward to 6 months down the line to the moment where you can say I told you so, and that's not happening.
I think there's so much that actually is required to get to that point where everyone can be committed, even if it's not their idea. And also what you're talking about, that to not take things personally on a personal level. We're talking about things here and our decisions. We're not talking about who is right. We're talking about what is right. And talking about how to get there, I really would like to walk our listeners through your journey with grit, and actually start with way before grit. So before you started or decided which product you're going to work on. So
Yep.
can you tell us a bit more about that stage?
Yeah. So I've been an entrepreneur more or less my whole life. Grit is the fifth company I started as a founder. And I knew, so my last startup was sold to a larger organization in 2014. And I think that, I knew, and I think also everybody around me, even the people that bought the company, they realized that, eventually I would leave and want to start something new. I was certainly aware of that. I enjoyed the first couple of years and kind of wasn't even thinking about what to do next, even though kind of was lingering in my mind that I would at some point. So as the mind started to wonder, about what to do next, I actually started kind of just writing down. I am a fairly avid note taker, so every single day I write down most of the things that happened that day, and if there are some, if I feel there are some interesting learnings or interesting things, or obviously any items that need to be addressed, I try to kind of write those down as well. And I started aggregating some of my kind of lessons learned from the last, I guess, 10 years or so, that I, just browsing through these notes, and started aggregating them, and kind of decided to focus on, okay, regardless of what I want to do. So I had several ideas. I think there were three main competing ideas about kind of what I wanted my next startup to be. But before deciding on any of those, so first of all, why do I want to do this? What's the motivation, and kind of where do, what do I want to get out of it? And then secondly, how do I want to build up the company or build out the team, regardless of what it is doing? So just let's remove the topic or the subject that we're going to be focusing on, and just talk about, okay, what does this, yet unnamed and yet, the company and the company that doesn't yet even have a mission, what does it look like apart from that? And I wrote what actually ended up being, I ended up printing a small booklet with, I guess you could call it a manifesto, but that's a little bit too kind of strong of a word. But it was like, here are some lessons, and here is what I take away with me from those lessons. And it was mainly about, anything from, atmosphere and culture, and ways of working, to processes and tools, and so on. But you should have then be able to take that and apply it to pretty much anything that I would be doing, or that a company would be doing, with some parameters. I was thinking about a software company. That's all my companies have been software companies. It was probably going to be a subscription business of some sort, but even that didn't matter so much. Software alone, and you could probably have taken that little booklet and applied it to any sort of software company.
So can you give us examples? What was in that booklet? You said about the atmosphere. What did you write there about the atmosphere?
Yeah. So I guess the number one thing is, what I've since learned is called psychological safety. Creating an atmosphere where nobody feels, where everybody feels safe to surface ideas, ask questions, even if they may think that they may be stupid questions or stupid ideas. That's an atmosphere that is very valuable. Also, an atmosphere where problems actually are surfaced rather than lingering kind of somewhere in the depths of the company, and only surfacing when the problem has become too big to, or at least a lot harder to address than if you learn about it early on, and where people actually feel proud of what they are working on and the team that they are a part of. So all of this, I mean, these are all very things that are very related, and they are also all things that you cannot just decide to have them, like they are the outcome of something you create rather than something that you create on its own. And that's kind of what a lot of the focus has been on. It's been on kind of creating that atmosphere, and also just getting everybody to buy into that building such an atmosphere and such a culture is a good thing. So that's yeah. So those are some of the things. So the ways this is manifested here, we pretty early on created a working agreement. So the team, I think we were 7 at the time, we came together and we kind of decided on what ended up being 5 sentences that we wanted to be true at all times, and we wanted to be able to look at them and say, you know, does this sentence still hold true? Does this sentence still hold true? And they're actually here in a pretty prominent place in the office. I'm looking at them right now. So, for example, the number 1 is we are proud of what we do, and then this actually helps not only if you use that sentence as an example. This helps not only with checking in every now and then and seeing are we still proud of what we do. It actually helps with decision making. So if we have 2 ways of doing something, then would we be proud of decision A? Would we be proud of decision B? If the answer to one of them is no, then the choice is obvious.
What if it comes like you have 5 statements there, and one is answering one of the statements, like one option, and option B goes into the other one?
Yeah, there are probably scenarios. You could probably imagine scenarios where that would be the case, and it's like with everything, especially like language. There's always some subjective. You have to look at it. There's some gray scales. You have to look at it with kind of some with some subjective thought in mind. And I think that we would not have a terribly hard time coming to a conclusion on like how do we weigh these things and kind of which way does it go. At least what I think we could say for sure is that having these sentences would make sure that the discussion would be more thorough than if we didn't have them.
Yeah, and brings you awareness to what matters and what actually what should be discussed. I love it. I really love it. You mentioned a bit that it's your 5th company, and the more experience you were getting, the heavier the team was actually in the decision making or importance. So how did you come from, or like why was it so that you first were focusing on the product and got into valuing the team aspect so much more?
Yeah. So I think, well, experience is the short answer. But I started my first company when I was 20, together with 3 other guys. Three out of 4 dropped out of university to start that company, and we were at that time we were driven by we had ideas about software that we wanted to create. And the passion was all about creating that software. And we were just working hard. We were young. We didn't have a lot of other commitments. And the natural thing to do was just to be at work, 16 hours a day, and trying to make this thing happen. You quickly learn, and some of us learned that lesson harder than others, that that's not sustainable. It sometimes takes a while to learn that lesson, and some people are learning that even kind of after 20, 25 years in the business. But that's kind of over time, gradually you realize that you cannot keep going at that pace, and then you have to find some. This is every startup is a marathon, not a sprint. So you have to have the stamina to actually finish to the goal line. And if you are if you are sprinting, let's say you're running the 400 meters, and then all of a sudden somebody tells you, oh no, this is a 10K race, then it'd be very hard to keep going. But that's very much what it looks like, and usually it's actually a longer run than you set out to do in the beginning. And then you start thinking more about the kind of balance, and you could call it work-life balance or whatever. crunches are fun. It can actually be a great fun to have, a common goal. You want to get it done on a certain date with a deadline or in a short amount of time as possible. And that's great for, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. But if that's a perpetual state, for a very long time, that's just not going to work, and that's not going to lead to a good outcome.
So basically, your experience has shown you that for you to be in the startup world in a healthy way for longer, you need a team.
Yeah, you need a team, and you need to think about the team as such, not just the outcome. Like I said in the beginning, I've come to more, I guess I was going to say I've come to realize, but I've come to think, at least, that every problem is a human problem, so every solution is also a human solution. So you have to, like, if you are, if you're not delivering, if you're not delivering the software or whatever you're trying to deliver, then that's not a technical problem, or very rarely is. It's probably a problem that has to do with the people. Maybe you don't have the right people, maybe people aren't motivated in the right way, maybe they are overloaded, maybe they are stressed out about something that's happening at home. All of these things are super important, and you have to factor them all in. So I think it's just, I think in some ways you could say I'm still driven by the same outcome. I'm still driven by kind of trying to create the product or the solution, but I've just realized that the means to that end is to have a well-functioning team that has a common, well-understood goal and is willing to work there, mostly self-motivated, but not kind of pushed by some external factors.
I love it. It's really about no one can do everything on their own, and it's important to understand that we have the passion, and there are enough people in this world who will share our passion and want to get the same goal, to create this solution, to create this problem together with you, or to create the product to solve the problem together with you. So it's good to understand that everyone wins from getting together.
Yeah, I've actually, so I think it was a part of the writing I did that led up to the starting grid, but I came to kind of characterize the job of a startup founder or startup CEO as kind of persisting of 3 things. So your role is to drive the vision. You don't have to own the vision, but you have to be the one driving it and kind of gathering the input and shaping it, and then communicating it. So a very big part of it is communicating the vision back and making sure that even though people are hearing the same words in the same sentences, they actually get a similar picture in their mind, because people can still have a very different idea about what it is, what the vision is, even though they agree on the words that describe it. Number 2 is nurturing the team, and that's what we've been talking about. And then number 3, never run out of money. And if you just do these 3 things well, you will be successful. And I use this framework, so I will tend to kind of rotate through these 3 things and say, am I doing enough to nurture to drive the vision? Am I doing enough to nurture the team? And then are we running out of money? And if we are feeling good on all 3, then I find the right thing to work on to move one of the 3 forward.
That's brilliant. That's really simplifying the things for you.
Yeah.
Again, it sounds like you're using a lot of inner compasses in a way. So the 5 statements that are on the wall, these 3 questions for yourself. So you're just having all those kind of checkpoints that make it easier for you on a daily basis to run the business and to keep moving forward with the team.
Yeah, that's as you say it, I'm realizing that is true. What I've found though, and I could also mention we have 5 sets of product principles that we are working with as well. So each of them is then broken down into a few more. And then when we actually worked those out as a team earlier this year. It was that we wrote them down. But what the reason for that and kind of where that came from is that we realized that we already had inherently built some, or we already had inherently some principles in place, but we just hadn't written them down. And just by capturing them and writing them down, we are able to much more easily show new people, how we work. And it's much easier to, when it comes to a decision, we can point to, this is what we wrote down as a principle. It's not forbidden to break the principle, but you have to have a pretty good reason for it. So, maybe that means that the principle needs to evolve, or there are some exceptions or something that, you could then capture as well. So it is very helpful to write these things down. And usually you are not making them up. Usually you are just trying to capture something that's already in your head or in the team's kind of psyche.
So talking about that team psyche and your head as well, you written down that booklet or manifesto before starting Grit, and now Grit is a bit over 2 years old. So has anything from what you've written down changed, evolved, maybe you got crossed out on the way?
The short answer is no. I haven't gone back and changed anything. But if I would, I certainly, if I went back to it, I certainly would. There are certainly things that I've learned. There are certainly things that have evolved since. I can, for example, point to meeting culture. So one of the things I wrote down in the booklet was that we would try to keep meetings at an absolute minimum. I think I even called it like we want to be a no meeting culture, with the exception of having kind of one weekly meeting where the teams are aligning. That's definitely not the case, but I still think that we are keeping meetings to a minimum, and they all the meetings we have a set purpose, and they have there's a reason it's there. The team agrees. To a varying degree, obviously, on the importance of the meetings that are being had. But we are regularly going back and looking at, especially meetings that are scheduled on a regular interval. Are we meeting the purpose that we set out for this meeting? Is it still valid? Is it too long? Is it should we even kind of cancel it? Should we do it kind of every 4 weeks instead of every 2 weeks, and so on? And what still rings true also is that we try to facilitate in the moment conversations rather than kind of scheduled meetings. It's a little bit harder in COVID when people are working remotely, but when you have people together in an office, the environment that you want to create is definitely not one of where everybody's interrupting everybody else all the time. But when you kind of happen to be kind of going to lunch together, you grab the opportunity to say, hey, can we talk about this thing here, how we're going to implement this feature, or how we should approach that ad campaign or something like that, because it's it's those interactions. And it's definitely something we feel again now when we don't have that, because we have built a culture that relies quite heavily on us being in the same office. That was actually one of the things that I wrote in that manifesto, is that I wanted people to be physically located in a single location, and mostly in the office while working. People are building great fully remote companies, but that's just very different. And I think that all other things being equal, I think that a company that is co-located in a single office will probably always win over a remote company. What you get with remote is you can tap into obviously a talent pool from all over the world, and there are other things you get there. But this is something that we built for. So in some ways, COVID and the shift to largely remote work had some effects on us. But the fact that we had gotten to know each other so well, and we had a fairly well-established work system, meant that it was a lot easier than if we started fully remote in that sense. So I still believe in the office and in the kind of physical presence of each other. And I think that the world will go less to fully remote than many people think it will after COVID.
That's interesting. I actually also wonder, do you think it depends on the culture and the country, whether the one-to-one or the remote or collocated is better? I'm just thinking in Iceland, it's easier to say collocated is better because the whole country is built on family-friendly infrastructure and those kind of things. But if you go to, I don't know, more US that you have background in, there might be more difficult to balance things in your life?
Yeah, so I mean the one thing that or there are several things that are different. I mean, one of them is obviously just the commute. So in places where you have an hour's commute each way, that's a lot of cost to pay for getting into the office. But and here it's relatively short. Despite some people complaining about the traffic, they haven't seen traffic. So that's one thing. The culture also, yes, but I wouldn't necessarily think that Icelanders as a culture are special in that. I think it's more about like the culture you build. So meaning that I think you could build, if you get together a good team, it will, in my opinion, I think it will always benefit from being able to be in the same physical location and sharing a lot of FaceTime with each other. Now, can you compensate for that with, partly remote and coming together, in the office once a week, or, having larger offsites a couple of times a year, something like that? Absolutely. But, again, like I said before, if you compare one to the other, I think that, being able to have this osmosis and this tight connection, especially early days, especially when the team is small. And that's actually another thing that we're passing right now. We're going over the 20 employee mark, and I've seen it before, and I've seen it in other companies that is the time when you when it stops being true that everybody knows about everything that's going on in the organization, and then you start seeing, oh, we need a little bit more structure around things. We need to kind of think a little bit more about the processes and the work systems and so on. And that is a fairly fundamental shift. There are a few of these kind of fundamental shifts that happen, and one of them is somewhere around 20, where not everybody knows each other as well. Not everybody knows everything that's going on. You now have people with varying degree of history within the organization, and some of your assumptions will no longer ring true, because people they are in a different state of they have a different level of kind of base understanding of what's going on.
So how do you plan to tackle that? And the question also, did you tackle that in the first 2 years? Because there is also quite a difference, I can imagine, between being a team or a company of 7 people and a company of 20 people. So how do you make sure that the culture that you have identified as the moving force is still lived through by everyone on the team?
Yeah. So a few things. First of all, I think that so if we talk about the practical things first, like the things that you implement, we've been fairly careful in kind of having a structure that grows with us. So when we were when there was only 6 or 7 of us, it was just me and then everyone else. Like that was the hierarchy. Everybody reported to me, and the one-on-one relationships and so on were all between me and other people. And there was a lot of we were mostly sitting in the same room, so everybody heard most of the conversations that were going on, at least if they wanted to hear them, and so on. So there was a lot of that. Then we have kind of gradually put more structure in place. So now we are organized in in a leadership team, and then 3 teams that they're under. So that's roughly enough for that scale. So now there are 3 people. Well, there are 4 people in the organization that that are managers that somebody reports to, and therefore you start distributing the one-on-one relationships and the organization of the work. And we've also been implementing more and more systems. When there was just initially for the first month there were just 2 of us, and then the level of organization was just something that was written on. There were 5 or 6 lines with checkboxes in front of them on a whiteboard that we could both see at all times. And then you start moving into ticketing systems, and then we just 2 months ago we implemented a single task system for the entire company. So that means in the engineering organization you would usually refer to these as the ticketing system. they tend to be very kind of engineering focused, like something like GitHub or Jira or something like that.
Jira.
Yeah, where kind of that is well suited for engineering tasks, but is not only not well suited, but also just intimidating to people that tend to be more kind of on the go-to-market side of the house. Where people, like, if we just talk specifically about tools, where people kind of gravitate towards tools like Asana and so on. So we managed to kind of get everybody on board with a very kind of participatory process of selecting a new tool and kind of weighing the pros and cons of all of this. But there was a strong buy-in that we wanted to have a single tool, and we have started to see. I mean, I'm not going to say it's utopia. It's not perfect, but the benefits of having everybody working in one system, where you then have a hierarchy where you can prioritize things, and it feeds off. Of that kind of prioritized hierarchy, you are feeding both engineering tasks and go-to-market tasks and other tasks that have to happen. That creates a good visibility and a good alignment between the work across the organization. So that is, that's another example. So we have evolved the structure, kind of the reporting structure, and kind of the, I guess you could say, the org chart, and the tools and the processes, and try to. I think we've never over-engineered a process. Like I think we've managed to be maybe just a slightly ahead of the curve and kind of implementing new things and kind of taking up new ways of working. And we haven't fallen terribly far behind either. And both of them can be bad.
Yeah. So that it's not only about the communication itself, but also the processes, as you say, the structures and the tools.
Yeah.
But talking about the team and the discussions, it sounds like you are discussing a lot. So it's, as you said, what I hear, that when you take the decision about the new tool to implement, it's everyone in the company who is taking active part in that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Has it ever been in like heated discussion, and not talking about this tool particularly, but any kind of discussion in the company?
Yeah, we debate for sure, but it very rarely becomes personal. I'm not going to say it hasn't happened, and in those cases where it has happened, we have, I trust. Yeah, I think I can say I trust with I have a high degree of trust in that, those things have been surfaced when they have happened, and then we've tackled those then kind of head on, instead of having them simmer somewhere and become a larger problem. And we definitely debate things. One of the ways that things tend to happen now, and I can point to a few projects, the new tool or the task management system and selection of that, and actually the implementation of that is an example where the whole company bought into the need to do this, and then we assigned a smaller team to actually kind of do the. So somebody here with cake.
Can you go and get a?
Yeah. So then we assign a smaller team of people to kind of go to select them, to actually have the to do the selection process, and then we out of that, so everybody can follow the process, everybody can chime in if they want to, but that team is responsible for the selection and then the implementation. So nobody is excluded, but also not everybody's input is absolutely required in the process. And we make sure that core team just represents the stakeholders, which typically kind of have are across the organization.
I see. That's great. So you brought in a coach.
Yes.
From the very start of Grid. Can you talk a bit more about that decision, why and how, and your learnings from the process?
Yeah. So I think a younger self, so a Hjalmar from 10 years ago, would have been shocked to learn that 2020 Hjalmar is actually has a coach and loves it. But the short of it was, so it kind of all came out of this preparation where the focus was quite a lot on the culture and the people, and the realization that whatever you want to do, you have to have not just a well-functioning, but a super well, organized and motivated team. I had never had a coach myself before, so that was new to me. But where I felt it was needed was maybe a little bit on the need or the idea initially came from, okay, we are a team, so let's get in somebody that is a team coach and can help us kind of align as a team. How we can make sure again that problems are surfaced, that we tackle them head on, that we have the psychological safety, kind of all of those things. And that's when we started talking to the coach that we still working with today. He helped us early on with some of the, for example, I think that the very first thing that we worked with him on was the working agreement. So we were, this was 4 months in or so into the formation of the company. He was working with us in an occasional capacity to begin with for those types of things, helping us with processes, helping us with things like the working agreement, but also just helping us to get to know each other and kind of why that's important and how that all works. And then we started offering, as the team grew, we started offering. Well, I guess first the team, we started forming it. So we broke into 2 teams, and then we had team alignments when we formed them, and we've actually more or less had team alignments again when we've changed the structure of any team. So, for example, when a new person joins a team, we will make sure that we do a little bit of a realignment on that. So it's been on the team level quite a lot, but then 2 things happened. First of all, we started experimenting with offering people individual coaching as well, which is then obviously totally confidential and just kind of one-on-one relationship between the coach and the person, and that turned out to be something that a lot of the team members liked and felt helped them in both their professional and to some degree also in their personal lives. And then as we formed I guess you could call it an executive team or a management team, which is the 4 of us that are kind of in the management positions, then we also got him to kind of help with that team, which is a little bit different from the other teams. Mm. So he's now helping us as an executive coach, the executive. So, almost on 4 levels: as an executive coach, one-on-one with the executives; as a team coach of the executive team; as a team coach of the teams, which is more occasional. That's when there's a change in the team, and then on a everybody in the company can opt in to kind of have one-on-one coaching for as long and for for whatever, coaching on whatever subject they would like.
And people are using that?
Yeah, so I think pretty much everybody has tried it for at least a few sessions. Some of us have stuck with it for a longer period of time. Some of us have. So actually, the way I use the coaching now is that I've gone through kind of periods where it's been more or less a weekly thing. Then I've right now it's more like we have the occasional meeting, but then if there's something that I really feel we need to work on. So for example, the transition of being a leader of a 12-person team to kind of being the leader of a 20-person team, I realized that my job was going to change a lot. The biggest change being that hardly anything is done by me anymore, meaning I'm not hands-on working. There are only a handful of things that I'm hands-on working on, and I'm trying to make myself redundant in a lot of everyday work, training other people to kind of take on those responsibilities and so on. And that was something we focused on for probably 2 months. Like, okay, what does the outcome look like, and how do I get from what's been very effective at the kind of 12-ish size to what we believe will be effective at the size of 20. And that's something that will continue because we will continue to grow. And the role, even though you have the same title, the job changes every few months.
Yeah, that's the fascinating and the tough part of being the CEO and the founder, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it's mostly just fun.
That's great to hear. So why did you actually come up with the idea of using the coach for the one-to-one sessions as well?
Let me think back. I actually think maybe it was his idea to offer that, and yeah, no, it was. So we were just, we were thinking about kind of how do we, so this was working really well for the teams, and kind of how do we evolve this relationship of working together. And this was one of the ideas that came up, and we decided to try it, and it worked well. And then new people have been coming in, and there's just been enough to focus on.
Mm.
Today we are yeah, we've gone from an occasionally working together to working together for 1 day a week. So he's here for 1 day a week, to 2 days a week when we were going through a hiring period in the late summer and early autumn, to now 1.5 days fixed, and that's the current level. And I think the need will only grow over time, but it's also, there's a little bit of kind of expansion and contraction based on what's going on. Actually, the coach is a part of our hiring process as well. So one of the interviews we do is what we call the culture interview, which is the coach is a part of that interview together with our COO or VP of operations, and they are working through how we work, but also trying to kind of gauge how do we think this person will fit into the culture and the ways we work here.
And as we discussed with you the first time we hopped on the call, it happens that you actually make mistakes there, right?
Yep. Yes.
With the hiring. So could you talk about that part of being a leader? What do you do with people when they don't perform or don't fit in the culture?
Yeah. So there are, I think I've learned quite a lot there. So I guess the first thing I would say is that we implemented a much more rigorous hiring process. When we realized that in some cases we had not hired the right people. So we didn't really have a hiring when we were just a small team, a handful of people. We didn't have a hiring process. It was like we had a couple of meetings. We liked the people. We made them an offer, and they would come on board. Mostly these were super well aligned, and they were mostly from within our network. There was a little bit of we were trying to hire out of network, but Iceland is small, and there are always some connections that can help a lot with the trust and knowing that you are hiring the right people. But we still made mistakes, and that led us to implementing probably a more rigorous hiring process than most companies of our size would have. And I really like it when we hear from people that participate in that process, especially those that don't end up getting hired, that they had a positive experience throughout the interviewing and hiring process. And we try to make that true for everybody that applies here. The other thing that I will say is that I always look at me first, or us as leaders first, if we have to let someone go. It is our mistake. Either we hired the wrong people, or we didn't create the environment that made them successful in the role. So they were, usually they are, most people are good people, but they may not be a good fit for the role or the company or the team that they're on. And that's usually kind of the mismatch that happens. So I try to kind of always look first internally and say, what could I have done better? What could we have done better? Rather than focusing on why that person wasn't, like, what's wrong with them. It's more what's wrong with us. But then sometimes you have to make hard decisions, and usually you actually it takes too long. I mean, when I somewhat read it's a fairly ruthless statement, but if you have doubts, that that somebody is right for the team, you've more or less made up your mind about letting them go. And that is more true than you probably admit at first. It's actually at least a lot more common that you think that you can kind of somehow fix someone within the organization, and it doesn't happen, than it is that you think you can fix someone and they're actually fixed. I mean, and when I say fixed, it's that much. Again, it's not kind of about something being wrong with them. It's about not being the right fit. I have seen it happen, but in those cases, what was going on. So I can recall two incidents where, there were performance issues or some issues with, somebody's work. And when you dug into it, you realized that there was something going on in their personal life that was in their way of being effective or being productive in their work. And in that case, that's very different. Like once you know that, and that's one of the reasons it's so important to know the people you're working with on a personal level. Once you know that, you can tackle that in a very different way than if you just see kind of the output, and that's not sufficient.
How do you find the balance there between knowing your employees on a personal level and going too much into personal relationships with them?
Yeah, I've thought about this a little bit recently. So I look at pretty much everybody I work with, and especially people I work with on a kind of daily basis. They just become your friends. It's a natural thing to happen. But then you have this weird thing that you are kind of somebody's friend and their boss, and you're having conversations, and sometimes it's not entirely clear which one it is. Like I said before, luckily we don't have a culture where it's a lot about kind of me telling others what to do, but it's still, I mean, that hierarchy is there for sure. One of the things, and actually this is something that I came to a conclusion with the coach on, is that it's actually fine to, it sounds funny and it sounds weird, but kind of you sometimes use this expression, I'm now going to put my something hat on, and I'm going to put my, and I would sometimes, when I think that that's going to be helpful to the conversation, I usually kind of approach a conversation as, we're teammates, we're friends, we're kind of peers, but then occasionally kind of making sure that I'm putting my friend hat on, or I'm putting my my CEO hat on, and I will just I'll just say that I'm going to put my friend hat on for a little while. You should take time off, or like, or even kind of put the boss hat on and say you should take time off. Like, and that can be very. That can be very different, but so it sounds corny, but it actually can be helpful.
If we roll back to what we just discussed before this question about the people who are not performing, and you mentioned that quite often it's going way too long, and we are not taking a decision as leaders for longer than we should. Yep. So how would you suggest people address that when they have those doubts, when they see the person not performing and they know it's not personal, and it's just not a match, and it's not a very temporary thing?
My thinking on this is evolving, but where it is at now is that as soon as and this is not about like somebody once handing in a sloppy work or something like that. It's like once you realize, hey, there's a pattern here. There's been there's been a period of weeks where you're not performing properly. Then approach people, tell them, like in a one-on-one situation, kind of tell them and try to give them very direct feedback, including examples of where what wasn't good enough and how it could have been better. And then saying, I want to work with you on improving this. You have to help me surface the things that will help, where we can help make you effective in this job. And then, I don't know exactly how explicit you want to make that, but in your mind, at least, you just say, this is a 2-month thing, or this is a 3-month thing. And then you should have, at that time, when those 2 months are over, you should, just put in your calendar, now it's decision time. Like either they're fixed and you don't have to have them on, doesn't have to be a formal program, but they're not on the program anymore, or they have to go. And I think it's just, I mean, first of all, it's fair towards the people. Like you shouldn't just fire somebody up on, there can be so many things going on. Like we said before, sometimes it can be something in their personal life that they just need time, or they need a little room to deal with that. But you shouldn't either, you're not doing anyone a favor by keeping them, maybe not happy, maybe not effective in a role for a long time. In my experience, I've actually more often had a conversation after the fact with people that are no longer working with me, but they have come and said, I think this was the right thing. I think, I think I was better off after, and I understand why this happened, than, I've had people mad at me, long after the fact.
And yeah, we can't be loved by everyone anyways. And you, as a founder, have the most responsibility for the company as a whole. And unfortunately, that sometimes means that one part of the whole has to go.
Yeah.
Can be tough.
There is actually, there is one very helpful visualization that a mentor of mine kind of talked me through recently, that I think is very helpful when you're thinking about people. So if you think about kind of a two dimensions, so people's character on one dimension and people's competence on the other, you should know that you can move them on the competence axis. So you can make them more competent, but it's very hard to move people on the character axis. So when you know what sort of character people are, they're probably going to stay there. You cannot change people's character, but you can, make them more effective. You can train them. You can make them more competent. And I felt that was, once I heard it, I felt, oh, this is actually very helpful. Like the thing, looking at somebody's situation and thinking, can I help them, or can we help each other, become effective here? Depends a little bit on what it is that is wrong.
I would probably argue here a bit, because character, it probably depends on the definition of character, because some people can be very irritating or irritated and impatient and so on. But like, I work with the personal development and self-leadership a lot. Even if I come into the corporate environment and I work with leaders or helping them lead the team, quite often it comes down to leading yourself first of all. So that kind of work actually affects your character in many ways, or how you're perceived as a person. So in a way, from that point of view, you can move people on the character axis. Or
Yeah. I see what you mean, and you can definitely. I would agree with that. And what I will say there is that you can also, people can learn to. In my opinion, you should not have to adapt to the character of your coworkers. Like if somebody is really grumpy, and then the solution should not be that everybody around them starts kind of going very kind of gently and not raising issues and so on. But you can work with them on understanding that, hey, the perception of you is that, hey, you're grumpy and scary, just so that you know. And sometimes people don't even know. And then when they know that, then there's a possibility, if they're open to it, that they can learn to kind of put some. I don't necessarily think that would be changing their character, but it's changing the way they kind of. They treat their own character in some ways, or display their character is probably the better way of saying it.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to come back to the coach question or discussion. One more question. So you have investors, and you recently raised had a successful round, right? And I could imagine that you are being watched on the financial part, and that's one of those three pillars that you as a CEO look at all the time. So how could you justify having a coach in-house to the investors?
That is not a problem at all. So the two biggest investors we have, which were the lead investor in our seed round just over a year and a half ago, and then in the Series A round that we did this summer, both of them were totally bought into beforehand that it is all about the team. Actually, usually, especially for early stage companies, team is the first thing that people look at. The investors look at. They look at the people and say, can this group of people pull off what they're talking about? And then they start looking at other things like, what's the thesis, how big is the market, and so on. So team, I think for every investor, team is kind of is top of mind. Furthermore, I think there's more and more realization that companies that invest in culture and the team and kind of making sure not necessarily paying the highest salaries, but giving people a great environment to work in, and kind of removing all obstacles for them to be effective in the job, tend to become the best companies. So in our case, Blue Yard out of Berlin and NEA out of San Francisco, we're both kind of really bought into this already. And I think that we already had the team coach when we were talking to, well, we'd already started working with him even when we had the seed raised the seed round. And in both cases, that was just a plus. That was not seen as like a negative. You're spending money on this. It's like, well, that's a positive. They understand how important that is. And I've gone to, there are many more. I think all of the best investment funds are thinking this way. I've been invited to a couple of investor conferences by investors that didn't end up investing in grit, that have all been about about leadership and about teams and about kind of culture. You're rarely invited to an investor event on on technology, sometimes on kind of go-to-market stuff, but rarely on kind of the tech side. And most of them seem to be thinking a lot about teams and team coaching and culture these days, and diversity and inclusion being a part of that.
That's great. It's great to see this shift happening on different levels and by different stakeholders.
Yeah,
that everyone can be on the same journey. Last question, Hjalmar. 3 pieces of advice to our listeners about how to lead from their zone of genius.
Now you're putting me in the spot. So, well, I would say, team first is probably the first one. So, we've been talking about this for more or less the last hour. Like, think about how you can achieve your goals by empowering and motivating the team that you have, rather, more than anything else. That's the first advice. The second advice I would give is, being approachable and being ready to. So you will know more as a leader of a startup company. You will know more. You will have thought more about the product you're building, the space you're in, the business, and so on, than anyone else on your team, even the people that are on the team with you for the longest amount of time. So your input into decision making at whatever level it is, kind of strategic, product or go-to-market decisions, down to kind of smaller design decisions. If somebody wants to seek your advice, try to make yourself available for those conversations, because you are adding a lot more value by being there and being able to take that 2-minute conversation that helps or guides someone towards what they're trying to achieve, than spending those 2 minutes on writing that email or working directly on something. And I think that thirdly, the realization, especially, I think that this takes a while for people to sink in when they have not been in that position before. But when you're starting the company, you are a very valuable. So the lesson would be, realize that you will not be kind of a hands-on. You will not have a lot of time for hands-on work moving forward. Early on, you're a part of the team. You may be writing code, you may be writing copy, you may be deploying the website, all of those things. But then gradually over time, your life becomes about guiding and empowering others more than it is about doing things yourself, and letting go of things, in that sense, and making sure that you have trained people well enough that they can run with things, and realizing that sometimes if they do things differently and they don't do things as you would do them, they may actually just be different. They may not be wrong. So just being able to kind of let go of things over time is hard, and you should be prepared for it.
I love those tips. And actually the third one I could take as another episode for another hour to discuss. I think there is so much in there. How to let go. And
great. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hjalmar, for this amazing hour. I'm pretty sure our audience will love it. And I'm looking forward to see how Grid is doing. And when you finally launch the product, I'm going to be using it. And it will be the first of the ambassadors.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. Thank you so much, Anna. And best of luck with your podcast.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.